Welcome to the Time Capsule Show, where we explore the meaning of life in the 21st century through the eyes of people just like you and me. I'm Joenrhuz.
And I'm Joerenz.
Today, we have a teacher and mitten maker of the famous mittens worn by Senator Bernie Sanders during the 2021 inauguration earlier this year, Jen Ellis. Welcome, Jen.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me.
Of course, we're so happy that you're here with us today. So can you just tell us more about yourself? Can you just tell us what inspired you to go into education, but also be a mitten maker?
Sure. So let's see, what did inspire me to go into education? I started teaching right after college. I joined Teach for America, and it was never my plan to teach, but I was good at it, and I liked it. And so after my commitment with Teach for America was over, I tried a bunch of other things. I worked for some nonprofits. And I got to the place in my life where I kind of felt like I needed to decide. I needed to choose a career. And so I decided to go back to teaching because I had a list of things I wanted, out of a career. And one of them was that I wanted to do something that mattered. I wanted to do something that was meaningful. And at the end of the day, I wanted to know that my day wasn't wasted, that there was some purpose. And so I felt like teaching fit that bill. And also, I also really wanted to have my summers off. So for the job that I had right before I went back to teaching, was at it was like a solid waste district. And I spent 2 summers just sitting in an office looking at all these beautiful days go by, and I was terribly bored. It was a really boring job. But it was the best paying job I had ever had. And I realized in that job that it actually didn't matter if I made a ton of money, if I hated the way my days happened, if I was totally felt like my job was useless and boring, then I was going to be really unhappy with my life. So I went back to teaching, and that was that.
Did you always think that you'd end up back into teaching when you were trying out all these different career choices and options?
No, I really didn't. I didn't really go back to teaching until I had that terribly boring job. Um, I don't know what I thought I was going to do. When you're in your early 20s, so many things seem possible. And I could have gone to law school. That was always something in the back of my head, was that I've always been a pretty good writer and a good reader. And I always thought, well, I could go to law school. And there are lots of different ways to be a great lawyer and to advocate for people. And that was something I felt passionate about. But yeah, it wasn't until I just sat at that boring job looking out the window day after day, and I really just came to terms with the fact that that was not what I wanted out of my life. And I love the rhythms of teaching too. I love the beginning of the school year, and it's so exciting, and it's the fall. And then, teaching is great in the sense that you always have your holidays off. So I had Thanksgiving off and Christmas off, and and then you're into January and February, and then the spring is right around the corner, and then you have and then we're at this time of year, which is beautiful, and everything's just blooming, and the kids are so excited to be back outside all of the time. And then the summer is just perfect. I love that break and that chance to sort of do something else with my life for a couple of months before going back.
Definitely.
So then how did you get into the process of making mittens, or doing knitting, quilting, and all that?
Well, I was always into sewing. I loved to quilt. And when I started at my present job, where I work in Westford, I met one of my students' parents was a sewer, and she noticed that I wore these mittens that appeared to be made out of old wool sweaters. And so she asked me about them. She asked me if I made them. And I was like, no, I just bought them at a craft fair or something. And she told me she had been experimenting with making mittens out of old wool sweaters. And so we started experimenting together. We had a sort of pattern. It was actually a really bad pattern that made bad mittens. But we modified it and changed it around and came up with a wonderful pattern for a very comfortable pair of mittens made out of old wool sweaters. So I actually don't knit. That's one of the funny things. Like people are still talking about how great of a knitter I am. I'm like, I actually don't knit. Um, so so yeah, I take old wool sweaters that might have a moth hole or they might have a tear, or maybe somebody sent them through the wash, and I cut them up and sew them together with other wool sweaters, and I line them with fleece. And so that was that. For a while, that parent and I had a little side hustle where we sold them at craft stores, we sold them at craft fairs, and then um, and then and then I had a baby and I was too busy to do it anymore. So, but I still did it a little bit, like I still every year would do one or two craft fairs. And one of those years when my daughter was in preschool, I gave her a pair of I was making mittens for the preschool teachers at her preschool, and I made an extra pair of mittens for Bernie Sanders because his daughter-in-law was the owner of my daughter's preschool. So I just gave the mittens to her and I was like, "You think Bernie would like these? I made them for him." And she was like, "Yeah, I think he would love them." And then apparently he did love them.
Well, that's great. When did you give those? Was it a few years back?
Yeah, I think it was in 2016 because I remember thinking I was very disappointed that he had lost the Democratic nomination. So and then of course we all know how that worked out. Then Hillary Clinton lost to Trump, and then, Trump had just been elected, hadn't been inaugurated yet. And it was just a sad time. So I made those mittens for Bernie, kind of thinking that he might be ready to retire soon because he's older. Um, and that was that. That was many years ago. And he somehow has managed to hold on to the mittens for all that time.
Were you surprised to see your mittens in that popular photo that went viral?
Oh, totally. I mean, I was totally surprised he wore them to the inauguration. He had worn them on the campaign trail in early 2020. So there was some buzz about them then. That was when the first round of memes went, viral. And at the time, I actually had some mittens for sale, and I sold out of what I had. And then this past year, I didn't make that many mittens because there were no craft fairs with the pandemic. So I, you know, when people started emailing me, and 18,000 people emailed me looking for mittens, I
Wow.
didn't have any. So I partnered with the Vermont Teddy Bear Company, which is this delightful company up here in Vermont that makes teddy bears and they do pajamas. And I've partnered with them to make the mittens. And so they're in the process of coming up with a prototype and finding materials and trying to get everything together so that they can sell the mittens.
Right. So, I mean, speaking of partnering, I saw on your websites you're partnering with a lot of people for good causes. For example, you supported a raffle to stop the end to domestic violence, and you're also partnering with a maple product that is, helping out Camp Takumta. And I love this about you, how you're using your platform to just spread positivity and to help other people.
Thank you. All of this happened. It was such a shock, and I didn't have a plan. I didn't know what to do. And also, I was leading a very private life. I mean, like most people, I mean, most people aren't just like prepared to be, for like hundreds of media and, reporters to want to interview you all at once. Um, and I certainly wasn't. So when this happened, a lot of people were like, "Hey, you could sell your mittens for $1,000 a piece. You could make a wait list. You could, you could gouge people basically." And that is not who I am. That wasn't what I wanted to do. And I'm, as a teacher, I'm very aware at how much this pandemic has negatively affected people. People who were food insecure before are really food insecure now. People who were, housing insecure are homeless. So there, there are so many different things I see as a teacher. And I thought, if I could use the mittens to help people, that in that way, like if somebody wants to spend $7,000 on a pair of mittens, then I don't really feel that bad about it, because it's for a good cause, right? It's not for my greed or capitalism or anything like that. Um, but yeah, great things have come out of it. The maple products sale is actually still going on. I think he still has a few bottles left, and 100% of the proceeds of that goes to Camp Tecumseh, which is a camp for kids living with cancer or who've survived cancer. And there was another fundraiser very similar to that with Darn Tough Socks, where they made a Bernie's Mitten inspired sock. That was actually much closer to the inauguration. It was like a week later, and they sold out overnight. And the proceeds of that went to the Vermont Food Bank. And Bernie's campaign sold a sweatshirt that made almost $2 million, which they donated to Meals on Wheels Vermont. So many great things have come out of this. And yeah, like you said, I've donated mittens to lots of different charities to auction off or raffle off to make money. And that's it. It's an easy thing for me to do. It doesn't actually take me that long to bake the mittens. And I have a few old sweaters kicking around. So for me to make a pair of mittens for somebody, and they could make, several $1,000s, and it could really help them, it's worth it to me.
Oh my God, that's so amazing. It really warms my heart to hear all of that. And so I think you would, I don't know, maybe I had read somewhere that you were writing a memoir now, right? And it's going to be about this experience of like how everything became, it was like a whirlwind with all this mitten frenzy.
Yeah, I am writing a memoir. I have an amazing agent. D. Fiore and Company is representing me, and so I feel very fortunate that I connected with them really quickly, and they helped me to put together a proposal, because I am a good writer, but that's not my profession, right? Like I'm a teacher, and so I needed some help, and I have a great writing coach. So the memoir actually is about a lot more than just this mitten experience. It's the working title is Generosity Brings Joy. And so it goes back to the beginning of my teaching career, and which was 21 years ago. I started teaching in the year 2000 with Teach for America. And then in 2001, of course, the World Trade Center fell, and the attack on America of 9/11 was horrible. And it also, it just reframed the way we think about our safety and our country and racism and all kinds of things. It was really quite an astounding time to be a young teacher. Um, and in the last 21 years, a lot of other astounding things have happened. And when these enormous events happen, you still get up the next day and you go to school and you sit with your students, and they've seen it on the news, and they might not understand it, but they're asking questions. They're wanting to know why and if they're safe. When the Sandy Hook shooting happened, the kids knew about that, and they wanted to know if they were safe. And the answer is no, right? Like, as long as we don't have more control over guns, kids aren't necessarily safe in school. And so it's a very it's a hard thing to do, to face a classroom full of kids and to know in the back of your mind that, like, you actually can't keep them safe. You can try, but and then the pandemic happened, and here we were right back in the classroom with a silent stalking sickness that could kill anyone at any time. Again, we could try to keep them safe. We had them wear masks. We tried to get them to stay 6 feet apart. I literally taught outside until it was like below zero. Like I kept the kids outside day in and day out, because it was much safer to be outside.
Definitely. Can you tell us more about that? So did you have them like sit in a circle around you? Did you bring all the desk outside?
I didn't bring the desks outside. I teach in a rural area and there are trees all around our school. And so some of the parents and I gathered over the summer. We cleared out a spot in the trees. We have a fire pit and we have stumps all around it. I have a little teaching kiosk, I call it, with a whiteboard. And the kids come outside every day with their outdoor classroom bags. And I have a wagon, which which I could also put on a sled in the snow, and I drag it out there with all of my teaching supplies. The kids have chairs that they sit in the woods to go read and write and do math. And there were times when we had to definitely come inside, but I definitely discovered this year the joys of the outdoor classroom. But my memoir is about all of that, right? Like it's about those early years of teaching and also, like we actually had another virus. We had the H1N1 virus in 2009. And during that virus, we had the Red Cross came in and ran these widespread vaccination clinics in the public schools, which felt like something right out of the 1960s, right out of Call the Midwife. But there it was, right in the schools, this huge public effort to vaccinate children against a virus. And, at the beginning of this year, I said to myself, look, I've taught through global catastrophes before. I've been present for wide scale vaccinations before. I mean, at that time, the beginning of this school year, I was really hoping that some vaccination effort was on the way, and indeed it was. So the memoir also talks about a lot about my personal life. So I'm a lesbian, and in the span of my teaching career, my marriage has become legal. Like that's huge, and also I have become a lot more out as a teacher. So in the beginning of my career, I hid that from my students because in North Carolina in the year 2000, I could have been fired for being gay and telling my students. Whereas like now it's something that's just celebrated as like all families are valued and your teacher's a lesbian and it actually doesn't matter. So there's a lot about that in my book too.
Yeah, that's absolutely incredible. And yeah, I remember it's like funny to think how so many things have changed in like the past 10, 15 years. I remember when I was in elementary school, a lot of the things we discussed now, like racism, sexism, the LGBT community, those were things that were like made fun of or poked that weren't really discussed in school. And now we're like, there's lots of agents of change, and it's great to see all the voices like out there, and it's like diversity really out there in our society now.
Yeah. Yeah, and I feel like we, especially this year after everything that happened with George Floyd, and I feel like we're being a lot more deliberately anti-racist and trying to amplify voices of color, and I feel like that's so important. It's maybe one of the most important things that we're doing in education. Um, and I really love that change, right? Like I love it that I'm not the only teacher who's like deliberately buying lots of diverse books, right? Like now everybody's doing it. It's now the thing to do. But there was a time when I felt like I was the only one doing it.
Mhm. What would your advice be to people who aren't so open to change?
Well, I think that in life you have to have a growth mindset because you you just if you don't, then you're just stagnant, right? Like if you don't stop viewing yourself as a person in progress, then then you stop growing. And if you're not open to other people's ideas or thoughts, I mean you don't have to like suddenly change all of your ideas or thoughts, but I like to think of it in terms of like how has my thinking grown or been affirmed or changed, right? Like your thinking can do lots of things. It doesn't always just have to flip flop. It can grow. It can be affirmed, and when we have these conversations on our staff, we talk a lot about that. Like, how has your thinking changed or grown or been affirmed? But it's all part of that growth mindset of viewing yourself as a person in progress.
Definitely.
Yeah, I absolutely agree about that with the growth mindset. So there's I noticed that you've also had other like career paths that you've sort of taken on. You've written poetry. You do some singing, songwriting. I think you also do some beekeeping. Is that right?
I do, yes. I keep bees. I'm not an extremely good beekeeper. My bees died this year, and they actually die most winters, which is super sad. Most beekeepers do experience loss of bees, but I have not exactly figured out how to keep them alive through the Vermont winters. Um, but I love them, and I buy new bees in the spring to replace the ones that died. And we spend a lot of time looking out our living room window. Our beehives are right outside the living room window, so we can just sit in our living room and watch them come and go. They're very fascinating creatures.
This might sound like a silly question, but have you gotten stung by a bee before?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I like to think of it as like nature's acupuncture, right? Like if you decide to become a beekeeper, you have to accept that you are going to get stung. It does become sort of a mission to see how good you can get at working with the bees so that you don't get stung. So I actually get stung a lot less than I used to because I'm just more careful, and I recognize that the bees actually do get used to you. They get used to your pheromones and to your movements, and you become less threatening to them if you continuously work with them, and you're gentle, and if you do all the right things.
Wow. So you've done like many different sort of things. If you weren't a teacher, do you think you would pursue one of those other paths as like a full-time career?
Well, I think right now, if I were to move away from teaching, I'd love to become a writer. I'm loving writing this memoir. It's it's so cathartic, and in a way it just kind of writes itself. And as I've been writing it, I've been thinking of other books I'd like to write, both fiction and nonfiction and children's books. And I actually have a lifetime of ideas, of books that I'd like to write. And I'm not sure if I could make a living being a writer. I'm the kind of person who needs something that's really steady and sure, surefire. Like I don't want to. I'm not really a huge risk taker, but I'd like to write on the side and see how it goes. And um, it would be my greatest dream to see this memoir be published. It hasn't found a publisher yet, but it is my hope that we find a publisher soon.
Well, speaking of memoirs, I think the next question of our show will definitely help us reflect more on your life and what could possibly be in your story. So we're now at the segment of the show that we like to call past, present, and future. So first, I'm going to ask you, how do you see yourself now, and how does it compare to the person you were 5 years ago?
Well, 5 years ago, I was on maternity leave, and I was so happy. I had been off of work for a year. I took a whole school year off to stay home with my baby, and I absolutely loved being a stay-at-home mom. It was everything I hoped it would be. It was so, and I was a mom older. It took us a long time to have our baby, and I just cherished it. I loved every moment of it, and I was definitely like at peak happiness of my adult life. And so that was when I was 37. I'm no 38. I'm 43 now, and um, I would say that as far as my happiness goes, this thing with the Bernie Sanders mittens has put a little dent in my happiness. It's actually it's hard to be suddenly known by so many. It comes with a lot of expectations, and um other people's expectations and mine. Like I constantly wonder, like, am I making the right choices? Am I talking to the right people? Am I presenting myself to the whole world in a way that I will be proud of later? And most people don't necessarily think about that, right? Because they're not presenting themselves to the whole world. They're just presenting themselves to their family and friends and their community. Um, so this was sprung on me really suddenly, and it has brought a lot of really high highs and a lot of really low lows. And I would say that the combination of those things has definitely put a dent in my happiness. But um, I am proud of the way that things have happened with this so far. And in 5 years, I read that your next question was, where do I see myself in 5 years? In 5 years, I think that I will still be a teacher. I'll be a mom of a 10-year-old, which astounds me, right? Don't blink because it does go by so quickly. Um, and I hope that I'll have at least one book published that I'm really proud of. And maybe I'll have a few more songs written and, hopefully not too many more dead bees. But I hope that I look back on this time with pride that when this really extraordinary and unexpected thing happened, that I remained true to who I am, that I didn't sell out, that I didn't get greedy, that I was able to show my daughter that actually the most important things were not dropping everything and making mittens and hiding away trying to make $1 million, that actually what I chose instead was to like go ride bikes with her after school and do crafts on rainy days and keep those little moments sacred because no amount of money can buy that.
Amen. That is so true. Like, there's just certain things money can't buy, and I feel like a lot of celebrities in our society kind of forget this. They might try to pursue different projects instead of being around their family and kids, and then life turns out, and sometimes it's not. They end up living with those kind of regrets.
Yeah. I hope that I don't have enormous regrets. I hope that I don't have any regrets, but people who say they have no regrets, I mean, I think that they're lying because like everybody has that like that one car that was a total lemon, right? Like I regret buying that car. I regret dating that girl who cheated on me. Like people have regrets. And I hope that my regrets are insignificant like those two that I just listed. I hope that for the most part I'm just glad that I spent my days with the people I love and doing meaningful work.
So I know you said that you mentioned about how you lived a more quiet life, I would say so, before all these images went out about the Mittens and Bernie Sanders, and now the whole world knows you. How would you define yourself? Who is Jen Ellis, if you could just say it in one or two sentences?
Well, I jokingly have on my Instagram and LinkedIn, like, I'm Jen Ellis. I made Bernie Sanders mittens because that's so funny. And like everybody knows who I am because of that. But when I list the most important things in my life, first, I'm a partner. I love my wife. We've been married for 10 years and together for 13. And like, she's amazing. And I'm a mother. And those are, I have a wonderful daughter who's 5. So I am a wife. Well, I don't like to say wife. I'm a partner and a mother and a community member. I mean, I have a wonderful community in Essex Junction, Vermont, great neighbors, great friends, and I'm a teacher. And I think being a teacher is broader than just my day-to-day life of I go to my second grade class and I teach reading, writing, and math. You know what I mean? Like I feel like I'm teaching more than that now. I think maybe, I mean, people have told me that my approach to this has taught them a little bit about what they could do too, right? Like um you don't have to spend your whole life in pursuit of money, right? You could spend your life in pursuit of happiness instead. You could you could recognize that generosity brings joy. That's the whole theme of my book. It's the title of my webpage, www.generositybringsjoy.com, because I have learned that generosity is so much more than just giving gifts like mittens or money or whatever it is that people give. You could give other things, right? Like you could give your time, Like you guys are giving me your time right now and I'm giving you mine, and that gives me happiness. And I don't and I mean you're smiling, so I'm assuming like giving you some amount of
You're
happiness
right.
too. And right, you could just give um your generosity of spirit, like being a little less judgmental, not being an internet troll. There's so many ways that you could just be a little nicer in the world. Not you personally, but people in general. And those little bits of generosity that you give people, even if it's just waving someone in front of you in traffic, it actually does bring you joy. And if we pursue joy instead of greed or money or, I don't know, fame, then our days are more meaningful, right? Like we're happier. And I think people need to be a little happier in life.
Definitely, and that comes from within, and money and all the outside things doesn't bring that feeling.
So I was about to ask you what principles do you live your life by, but I think it would be basically that, right? The pursuit of happiness.
Yeah, I think the pursuit of happiness and joy is a big one. There's a great folk song by this woman, Ellis, and there's a line that says, "What if loving what you have is everything?" And I heard that line, at a time when I really needed to hear it, right? When I was like in my 20s and just sort of grappling with like, you know, I'm still living in an apartment and I don't know what I'm doing with my life and everything seems to be falling apart and I'm single and like you have all these doubts and you don't know what to do. And she has this great line like, what if loving what you have is everything? And so then you start taking stock of like, what do you have? Are you healthy? Well, you have that. A lot of people don't have that. You have a family who loves you. That's pretty lucky too, because a lot of people don't have very supportive families. Do you have at least one friend? Do you have a dog? What do you have? Because if you love what you have, actually is everything. And if you're holding on to something you don't love, like Marie Kondo that, let it go.
That is so true. I mean, sometimes people get so caught up with what the world expects them to have that sometimes everything you need is right in front of you. And it's all about perspective.
Yeah, I think that your perspective is a lot too. The times that have been the hardest for me after the inauguration have been the times when I have started to expect more from this than what I was getting. And then those are the times that self-doubt has crept in and where I've wondered if I've chosen the wrong thing, like like our car just died and I'm out there car shopping thinking, like if I had gone and made $1 million off of this mitten thing, I'd have the nicest new car right now. But that's not what I did. And I don't regret it yet. I
So I
hope
think
I
we
won't
kind
regret it.
of so for our next question, I think we kind of touched on it a little bit, but you feel free to add more to it. But what are you grateful for?
My family. I'm so grateful that I met my partner when I did and that she loves me. Sometimes I just think I'm so unlovable. And I actually think everybody thinks that about themselves. But here's this person who just keeps loving me even when I suck. Like even when I'm a terrible partner, she still loves me and I still love her and that is so fortunate. And long after our daughter is grown and out of the house, at the end of the day, I still want to go to bed next to her. Like I still want to be with Liz. So I'm most grateful for her, and I'm very grateful for our daughter. It is a minor miracle when lesbians have children. That's the short end of that story. But yeah, having a daughter, I carried her, so that just feels like a miracle every day to have this person who's growing and healthy and smart and interesting and also naughty and gives me a run for my money, right? Like it's such a gift to be able to parent her. And then we also have a dog. And they say you shouldn't judge a book by its cover, but we totally found this dog off of Pet Finder, and he was the cutest thing we ever saw, and we totally judged that book by its cover. And he's a great dog, so that was really lucky. Like, we really love him. He's just a total mutt, but he'll crawl right under your lap and just fall asleep. So I'm grateful for him. And I'm really grateful that there's a vaccine, that there are multiple vaccines, right? That the end of the pandemic is in sight. And hopefully better times are ahead.
Hopefully, we're all hoping for
So
that.
too. All right, so now we've come to the question of the show where we get our title from. If you were to leave something in a time capsule for people to dig up 100 years later, what would you put in there and why?
Well, I think I'd put a pair of mittens in, and a copy of my book. Because I think, maybe some news articles, maybe some memes, because I think that this thing that happened with the memes and the mittens was so timely, right? Like, those memes were so funny right at a time when we were suffering. Like, people needed something to laugh about, and they needed something that transcended politics and religion and nationality and race, like something that was funny to everyone on some level. And I feel really lucky that in some way I contributed to that, right? Like, I like to think of it in terms of dominoes. Like, many years ago, I set a train of dominoes in motion. And many dominoes later, this very funny thing happened for the whole world to laugh at, like a global joke, when we needed it most. And so if I had anything to do with that, which I did in this weird way, I'm so glad. I'm glad that that's what I'm thankful. That's what I'm famous for, and not, something bad. But I think that's what I would do, is just document that, and also put my book in there too, because I think what I love about my book, and I've been writing it, since February, so it's well on its way, is that, like, it may be that I only existed to the rest of the world, like, that my existence started on January 21st. But I've existed for a long time, and like everybody has, right? Like, we all have a backstory. And in my book tells my backstory, and it tells, it shows a lot of stories that have shaped who I am and my values. And I think it's interesting. It's very much a story of our time, right? Like, a lesbian teacher, teaching through the first 21 years of our new century, in a time when, like, school shootings are really prevalent and racism is, like, beating down the door. There's so much going on, that we as teachers are, like, facing every day and trying to teach through. It's really been an astounding time.
Do you have a timeline of maybe when your memoir is going to go out, and maybe when people can go out and purchase the book?
Well, like I said, I'm working with D. Fiore and Company right now as my agent, and we're going to be looking for a publisher. So the timeline for a book to get published, I think, is around a year to 18 months. And so I don't know, maybe the summer of 2022. But the interesting thing is, I think that some people could be dismissive and be like, oh, that will be so far past this Bernie's mitten meme thing. Like, will people even remember? And I think the answer is yes, because next winter, when the Vermont Teddy Bear Company has those mittens for sale and people are buying them for the holidays, and then photographers are clamoring to get another funny picture of Bernie Sanders. And also, there may be some other famous people who I've now given mittens to, who may be appearing in public wearing the mittens.
Are you allowed to tell us?
That's just no. I mean, keep an eye on those memes. I'm sure they'll show up, right?
Definitely keep an eye out.
That's not why I gave people the mittens. But I I give away mittens now. I don't sell them anymore. Because if I tried to sell them, people would just rip me off, right? Like they buy them for $30 and go sell them on eBay for $2,000. So
Oh my God. Yeah.
so now I just yeah, now I just give them away to people I love and care about, and sometimes to people who I look up to and admire, change makers, lawmakers, people who've inspired me. I now have this gift that really has some astounding value to people. It's not just an old piece of wool that I, spared from the landfill.
That's true. Your gloves are, sorry, your mittens have become so iconic in our society.
Yeah. Yeah. And um so I think that there's more that's about to happen. I think there's more down the line. And I can't speak to everything. But there will be some more things. There's some television appearances coming up that are funny, and um yeah, I don't think it's over. And uh we'll see what happens in the future. But if this blows up again next winter, so it blew up in 2020, blew up again in 2021 in a big way. If it blows up again in 2022 and I have a book coming out, that could be a big deal. That could really be a successful book. And even if that doesn't happen, my book is interesting. I mean, I am. I mean, I think it's a good story. Um,
Well, we can't wait to see that. I'm
So
definitely going to
excited.
want to read that. Does each copy of the book come with a pair of mittens?
no, no. But I think that there are a lot of cross promotional possibilities there, right? Like, you know, I've got this book coming out. Vermont Teddy Bear has these great mittens coming out. Maybe Darn Tough runs another sock. Maybe next year there's a new mitten that's popular that somebody else wore. Who knows? I think that the possibilities are endless, and I appreciate the platform that this has given me to be an outspoken teacher, right? Like, you don't actually have a lot of teachers these days who are actually in the classroom still, but who are also public figures, being like, no, you can't cut our pensions. And yes, we still exist and we need protection. We need gun control. And, I think it's good to have a teacher in this role. Um, I'm not necessarily saying I'm the best person for this role, but I happen to be the person in this position. And so I'm going to use it to shine a light on the things that I care about. And teaching is one of them. Gay rights is another. Um, I don't think I'm going to shine much of a light on beekeeping. That's just something I'm doing on the side. I'm not very good at it. So if you want to learn about beekeeping, you should find some other celebrity who keeps bees and talk to them.
Maybe Beyonce.
Yeah.
You'd have like a designer.
Um, yeah, I think I'm also grateful for this platform because in this time in history, I think we need more champions for joy. And we need people who are leading by example. So I always say generosity brings joy, but there are so many things that bring joy. And when joy comes into your life, please stop and accept it and notice it, participate in it, because it's fleeting and it doesn't happen all of the time. And when you're experiencing joy, it's worth noticing and it's worth cultivating.
Definitely. We're so happy for you, Jen, and we wish you more success in the future. Is there anything else that you'd like to add to tell our viewers? Where can they follow your journey and learn more about everything you're doing?
So I have a webpage, generositybringsjoy.com, and I have a mailing list. You can subscribe there. I'm also doing a public speaking tour right now. I've been speaking at colleges and for some businesses, and I've been doing some TV appearances in my in my spare time when I'm not teaching. So I'm available to book. I'm actually booking for things this summer. I have a bunch of different things that are going on this summer. I'm fully vaccinated now, so I can actually do some in-person things. Um, and they can follow me at VT Awesomeness on Twitter, right? Like I made that name before I was famous. I'm not sure I would choose
I
that
love it.
now, but that is the name that um, and I think on Instagram I'm just Jen Ellis Vermont, and um, yeah, I've definitely had to increase my internet presence as a result of this.
Well, Jen, you definitely are awesome. I can affirm you that.
You are such a ray of sunshine, and thank you so much for being a part of our time capsule. Thank you to all our viewers for watching. Please make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and to follow Jen and her journey on all her social media channels. Tune in again next week to meet another amazing addition to our time capsule. See you all next time.
Bye.
Bye.